Proud of the Sky. Chapter 1. The night sky was like ink, the stars in the sky were stirred by the cold wind, and above the ancient imperial city the fire and smoke were intertwined. Aotian stood on the top of the city wall, holding the fragment of the divine formula in his hand, his eyes as sharp as a cold blade. He raised his eyes to look into the distance, and there were war drums and thunder from the sky, demons were raging, and the internal strife in the imperial dynasty had reached its peak. No one else is allowed to interfere in the struggle for the world. Aotian whispered to himself, the wind whistled, as if the heaven and earth were echoing his will. Suddenly, a golden light flashed, and the divine technique in his hand trembled slightly, emitting the power of the ancient rune pattern. This divine technique is the secret that allows mortals to cultivate into gods, and it is a heavenly secret that only appears once in thousands of years. In the distance, demons ravaged the city walls, and the soldiers fled in panic. But Aotian walked steadily, the light of divine formula pulsing in his palm, like the heart of heaven and earth. He snorted softly, and the corners of his lips curled up slightly, with me here, who dares to stop me? Suddenly, on the city wall, the fragments of the Book of Heaven fell from the sky, and the scroll fluttered and glowed with golden light. Aotian stretched out his hand to take it, feeling the infinite wisdom and power in it, and his heart was shocked. The vastness of the world will eventually be in my palm. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 2. The morning light was dim, but the imperial court was turbulent. Emperor Mo Yao sat on the dragon throne, his brows as cold as ice, his face solemn. Important ministers Li Suans and Situ Fengxiang, each holding their own position, argued endlessly and fiercely. Your Majesty, if you do not control the divine secrets, the world will be in chaos. Li Suans roared, his voice shaking the palace. Situ Fengxiang sneered, who in the world is worthy of holding the divine secrets? The young Aotian has it in his grasp. If he is not restrained, he will defy heaven. At this moment, Aotian stepped into the hall, the divine secrets in his hand gleaming faintly. He glanced at the ministers and spoke in a voice as cold as iron, your quarrel is only the path to your own destruction. I, Aotian, am striving for supremacy. The whole world is within my grasp. The atmosphere in the palace instantly froze, and the important ministers were secretly shocked, but the emperor said coldly, Aotian, do you know the weight of what you said? Aotian smiled indifferently, I know. Know the situation of the world, know the power of demons, and know the history of the divine world. I am proud of the sky in my hand, and I will go to the world. As soon as these words came out, everyone in the hall was shaken, as if they heard the sound of ancient divine formulas and heavenly books echoing in the air. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 3. Outside the imperial city, demons were rampant, and blood and rain were bloody. Aotian stepped out of the city gate, and the light of the divine technique burst out, forcing the demons to retreat. With a wave of his finger, the runes in the air flashed, forming a barrier of light, and the demons screamed, with endless fear in their screams. Mortals who cultivate gods must first gain the courage of the heart. Aotian murmured, the power of the divine technique surged in his body, and he felt the pleasure of the fusion of strength and wisdom. At this time, a mysterious woman appeared, dressed in white, her eyes were like stars, and her smile was charming for 1,000 years. Aotian, you finally appeared. The woman's voice was like flowing water in a valley, but it was filled with endless coercion. Aotian's eyes narrowed slightly, you are the lord of the demon realm. The woman chuckled, my name is Yueli, and I have been waiting for someone who can match me for thousands of years. Today, you are arrogant, and you finally hold the divine formula, allowing me to see hope. The two of them intertwined their eyes, the heavens and the earth seemed to be shaken by it, and the roar of the demons in the distance seemed to be stagnant. The situation in the world is not only the dispute between the imperial dynasty or the rampant demons, but the mystery of the love history of the divine realm and the secret scroll of the heavenly book. Yueli whispered. Aotian smiled secretly in his heart, interesting, this game is more exciting than I imagined. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 4. As night fell, flames blazed across the imperial city, and demons wreaked havoc. However, Aotian and Yueli worked together to repel the enemy forces outside the city walls. The divine techniques merged with Yueli's power, and runes of light surged like a river. The demons encountered the barrier of light, and their wails were heard everywhere. Aotian, you have mastered the divine formula, can you bear the responsibility of the heavenly book? Yueli asked. Aotian raised his eyebrows, and the light of the divine formula in his hand burst, the book of heaven is in hand, and I will go to the world. I am proud of the world, and no one can stop me. At this moment, high in the distance, a black shadow flashed. It was the inspector of the divine realm. His identity was mysterious and unpredictable, and his eyes were fixed on Aotian like cold iron. People of the divine realm. Actually here, it is not easy to come here. Aotian thought secretly, with a smile on his lips, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. Since we are here, let's compete with each other. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 5. In the imperial court, important officials plotted to seize the divine secrets and monopolize the world. Li Xuan summoned his closest ministers for a private discussion and whispered, "Young Aotian possesses the divine secrets, making him a match for ordinary men. If we don't secretly check him, he will defy heaven and manipulate our dynasty." Situ Fengxiang sneered, "Do you think this conspiracy will succeed? Young Aotian is no ordinary man. With his divine secrets, even the divine realm will be shaken." Just then, a dazzling sound emanated from outside the city. Aotian, clutching the divine secrets, stood shoulder to shoulder with Yueli. A radiance surged like a galaxy, instantly shattering all plots and malicious intent. The dynastic struggles, the rampage of demons, the love affairs of the divine realm, all lie in my hands. His voice, like thunder, shook everyone. The night wind howled, and the runic light rushed through the city, heralding an unprecedented bloody storm, and the pattern of the world would be completely changed because of the sky. Chapter 6. The moonlight was deserted, and the top of the imperial city was still in flames. Aotian stood alone in the city tower, his divine technique trembling gently in his palm, emitting an unfathomable runic light. He raised his eyes and saw that in the wasteland in the distance, a monstrous demonic aura was gradually approaching, as if it was about to engulf the entire imperial dynasty. The true power of the demon world has finally appeared. Aotian said in a low voice, his voice cold. At this moment, Yueli appeared from the black mist. Her expression was charming but with a hint of solemnity. "Aotian, this is not an ordinary demon army, but a blood nightmare ancient clan, which has devoured thousands of cities and countries." Aotian's eyes froze, and the divine formula instantly exploded, a dazzling golden light in his hand. The golden light rushed like a heavenly river, soaring straight into the sky, splitting the night sky in two. The blood nightmare general stepped out of the black fog, clad in pitch-black armor, his eyes as red as blood, and his voice as thunderous as thunder. "Young man, you dare to stand in the way of the blood nightmare ancient clan? Hand over the divine secret, or I will massacre the entire city." The people under the city were frightened and wailed, and the soldiers were even more frightened. However, Aotian just smiled faintly, and his voice was as cold as a knife. "Ha, a group of demons, dare to be presumptuous in front of my Aotian." As soon as he finished speaking, the divine runes rang out, and thousands of golden ancient characters suddenly appeared between heaven and earth, suppressing the demon army like a torrent. The blood demon roared and shook the sky, but Yueli's expression changed and she whispered, "Aotian, this is just the beginning. The real storm is yet to come." Underscore 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 un. Chapter 7. In the inner court, arguments raged. Li Xuan, a prominent official, had a gloomy expression. The return of the ancient blood nightmare clan is a sign of demise. And yet, the young Aotian possesses the divine secrets alone, unstoppable. This could become a disaster in the future. Situ Fengxiang shook his head and sneered, "If Aotian can fight against demons with his own strength, wouldn't it be a blessing for the imperial dynasty? What are you worried about? I'm just afraid that he will take away your power." The court was filled with the clamor of arguments. Emperor Moya remained silent for a long moment before suddenly speaking in a deep yet commanding voice, "The Divine Sutra and the Heavenly Book are fate-altering items. They must be under the control of our dynasty." As soon as these words were spoken, all the ministers echoed them. But at that moment, the palace doors flew open, and Aotian proudly stepped in, Divine Sutra in hand, his eyes cold as ice. "Control." His voice was like cold iron. "If the people of the imperial dynasty are not sincere, controlling the divine technique will only lead to self-destruction." The whole hall was silent for a while, and the important ministers were all shocked. Aotian looked directly at the emperor, and the corners of his lips raised slightly. "I am Aotian who has won the world, not for anyone's power, but for this common people." Mo Yao's eyes were deep, and no one could see through his thoughts. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 8. Late at night, Aotian sat quietly beneath the divine incantation, runes crisscrossing, his aura as if heaven and earth were one. Suddenly, a mysterious aura descended from the sky, and the fragments of a heavenly book floated silently, transforming into golden light and landing in Aotian's palm. Within the fragments, 4 words emerged: History of the Divine Realm. Suddenly, countless images appeared in his mind: the fight between the gods of the Divine Realm, the killing of immortals and demons, and the blood flowing into rivers. The scenes are like a reenactment of 1,000 years ago. Aotian was surprised, but felt the blood boiling in his chest. This fragment tells him a surprising secret: the rebellion in the Divine Realm has not subsided, and the gods are just suppressing the flames of war and waiting for a new bearer to come into the world. Bearer? Is it me? Aotian clenched his fists, and his eyes flashed with sharp light for a moment. At this moment, a cold voice sounded, as if from the heavens: Young man, you have peeked into the Forbidden Realm. From now on, you will bear the enemy of all gods. In the air, a white-haired divine envoy appeared, his breath like eternal ice. His eyes were cold, but with the intention of scrutiny. Aotian raised his head and smiled: since it is a taboo, then I will break it. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 9. The next morning, dark clouds gathered over the imperial city. A white-haired divine messenger named Xian Li, an inspector of the Divine Realm, descended upon the imperial court, his chilling voice echoing throughout the land: divine secrets are not for mortals to master, and the heavenly book is even more taboo. Aotian, surrender everything and follow me back to the Divine Realm for trial. The common people were horrified, the generals and soldiers knelt, and the emperor and his ministers' expressions trembled. However, Aotian raised his eyes and looked directly at Xian Li: fearless, the divine formula is awakened because of me, and the heavenly book is also revealed because of me. Since you have no ability to protect the Divine Realm, why should you take away my things? As soon as these words were spoken, Xian Li frowned suddenly, and a divine light flashed in his hand, wanting to suppress Aotian with the power of thunder. Yueli instantly stood in front of Aotian, her demonic aura surged, and her voice was cold: if you want to move him, pass me first. The 3 forces of the human world, the demon world, and the divine world collided fiercely over the imperial city. Light and shadow intertwined, and the airwaves swept across the entire continent like a hurricane. The people could only shrink to the ground, fearful in their hearts. This is not just a dispute between the imperial dynasty, but the subversion of the entire pattern of heaven and earth. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 10. The sky roared, the light and shadow flipped, and the imperial city almost collapsed in the flames of war. Aotian and Xian Li clashed fiercely, the divine technique runes and divine light attacked each other, and the heavens and the earth were trembling. Yueli's demonic power surged, barely resisting part of the impact. Suddenly, the fragments of the Book of Heaven trembled again, and a golden light penetrated the void and went straight into Aotian's body. His mind shook, and he instantly felt an unprecedented power. This is the origin of the Book of Heaven. Aotian was surprised, but then sneered: in that case, let heaven and earth see the true power of my Aotian. He clasped his hands together, and the divine incantation merged with the light of the heavenly book, transforming into an unparalleled force. A golden light shot up into the sky, instantly sending Xian Li retreating several steps. His expression was solemn: this child can actually align with the heavenly book. The emperor and his ministers were utterly astonished, and the people exclaimed in shock. Aotian's gaze was cold, and his voice echoed far and wide: whether in the realm of gods, demons, or even the imperial court, I, Aotian, will set foot upon them all. Aim for the unparalleled dominance of the world. Who dares to stand in my way? The sky shook, everything lost its color, and the shadow of the sky was elongated, as if it merged with the entire sky. Chapter 11. In the aftermath of war, the imperial city still stood, but it was in ruins. The people knelt on the street, watching the golden light dissipate in the sky, their hearts shocked. Aotian stood in front of the hall, with the divine formula in his hand, and the afterglow of the heavenly book wrapped around his body, like a god of war standing on the sky. Xian Li retreated, but he wasn't truly defeated. Standing high in the clouds, his eyes stern and his voice as hard as steel, he said: Aotian, the divine realm will never tolerate a mortal challenging its order. If you continue to persist in your delusion, you will surely bring about your own destruction. Aotian smiled indifferently: order? The order in your mouth is nothing more than a shackle between the strong and the weak. If the divine realm only knows how to suppress, then let me reforge it. Xian Li's eyes were gloomy, and in the end, only a cold snort was left, and the light disappeared. As night fell, Emperor Mo Yao summoned Aotian in the imperial study. He was silent for a long time, and suddenly asked in a low voice: do you really want to be an enemy of the divine realm? Aotian's eyes were as firm as iron. It's not that I want to be an enemy, but they have already regarded me as an enemy. In that case, I have only one battle. Mo Yao stared at him deeply, his heart was both respectful and worried. He knew that from now on, the battle for the imperial dynasty was not only about the throne, but also about the survival of the three realms. Chapter 12. The next day, the Blood Nightmare ancient clan regrouped, but this time instead of attacking the imperial city, they went straight to the northern border. The northern border is snowing heavily, and the bones are like mountains. Legend has it that in the depths of the extreme north, there is an ancient demon king Nightmare Emperor. If the Blood Nightmare Gu clan releases it, the entire human world will fall into endless darkness. Aotian received the news and immediately decided to set off. Yueli looked at him coldly, with a hint of mockery in her voice. Do you really think you can stop the Blood Nightmare ancient clan by yourself? You are just a mortal, even if you hold the divine secret, there will always be a limit. Aotian chuckled, but his eyes showed determination. If I don't go, who will go? Yueli was silent for a moment, and finally sighed, okay, I'll accompany you. The two embarked on the road to the north, covered in snow along the way, and the wind was like a ghost crying. At night, by the bonfire, Aotian suddenly asked Yueli, why are you willing to take risks with me? A hint of complexity flashed in the depths of Yueli's eyes, and in the end, only a whisper was left, because you are very much like a person you used to be. Aotian didn't ask any more, just stared at the snowy night quietly. Chapter 13. In the northern wasteland, the Blood Nightmare ancient clan's ritual has begun. Thousands of demon soldiers surrounded a huge black altar, blood pooled into a river, and in the center of the altar, a huge pitch-black bone shadow was sealed by a chain, which was the legendary Nightmare Emperor. The Blood Nightmare demon general roared loudly, with the blood of all spirits, break the seal and welcome the return of our emperor. The heavens and the earth shook, and the snow was dyed blood. Aotian and Yueli watched from afar, their expressions solemn. Aotian whispered, if the Nightmare Emperor is allowed to emerge, the world will be doomed. Yueli suddenly bit her lip, her voice trembling with a hint of trembling. Aotian, I have to tell you one thing, the Emperor. It's my father. Aotian was shocked and stared at her with his eyes. Yueli looked painful and her voice was low, although I am a demon race, I don't want to see the mainland fall into slaughter. If you want to stop him, if necessary, even if it is my own hands. Aotian was silent for a moment, and finally reached out to hold her cold hand, his eyes firm. Then, let's stop it together. Chapter 14. The power of the blood sacrifice became stronger and stronger, the Emperor's bone shadow gradually solidified, and his crimson eyes slowly opened. Aotian no longer hesitated. The divine incantation in his hand erupted with light, pouring down like a golden river, striking the altar. The Blood Nightmare demon general laughed heartily, brandishing his black blade to meet the attack. Countless demon soldiers charged frantically. Heaven and earth instantly descended into a battlefield of blood and fire. Aotian waved his divine technique, every blow was like thunder, and the demon soldiers turned into ashes. Yueli was full of demonic energy, and a silver fox shadow appeared behind her, its claws tearing through the void. However, the Emperor of Demons on the altar gradually woke up, his aura was like an infinite abyss, pressing everyone out of breath. The Emperor's low voice sounded, who dare to stop me? Heaven and earth stood still for a moment, and everything seemed to fall into dead silence. Aotian's heart was shaken, but he still raised his magic technique, his eyes like a knife. Aotian. Chapter 15. The Nightmare Emperor's chains broke with a bang, and the black mist swept over. In an instant, the frozen ground of the northern borders crumbled, snow-capped mountains collapsed, and the earth and sky churned. Countless demon soldiers knelt on the ground, shouting, "Our Emperor!" The Emperor of the Nightmare slowly stood up, his body as tall as a mountain, his eyes fell on Aotian, showing a hint of interest. "Mortal, can you look directly at me?" Aotian's heart was beating wildly, but he still smiled coldly. "What I look directly at is not your power, but the common people in this world." The Nightmare Emperor laughed loudly, his voice shaking the heavens. "How dare you? If that's the case, let me see what qualifications you have to speak so brazenly against the will of heaven. He slapped it with a palm, and the world collapsed. Aotian met with it, and the light of the divine technique soared into the sky, colliding head-on with the monstrous magical power. Amidst the roar, the land of the northern border was torn apart, turning into countless abysses. Chapter 16. Aotian was in severe pain all over his body, and blood overflowed from the corners of his mouth, but he still gritted his teeth and stood. The emperor snorted coldly, mortals are just ants after all. However, at this moment, the fragments of the heavenly book suddenly flew out from Aotian's chest, transforming into a dazzling golden light. Runes crisscrossed the fragments, forming a golden chain that once again entangled the nightmare emperor. The emperor roared angrily, "Heavenly book! It turns out that it is still in this child's body." Aotian felt the power surging wildly in his body, almost breaking his body. He roared in pain, but still held on to the magic formula, Zhen. Between heaven and earth, countless golden runes fell, suppressing the nightmare emperor like raindrops. Yue burst into tears, but waved her hand to help. The demonic power blended with the light of the magic technique, and the chain became stronger and stronger. The demon emperor roared and shook the sky, and was finally locked back to the altar again, and the black mist gradually dissipated. Chapter 17. After the war, the northern border was covered with blood and snow. Aotian was seriously injured and could hardly stand. Yue supported him, her expression both relieved and sad. "You saved the world." But almost buried himself. Aotian smiled bitterly, "If the world is peaceful, it is worth it." At this moment, Xianli appeared again, his eyes were cold, and his voice was like iron. "Aotian, you not only colluded with the demon race, but also took away the power of the heavenly book." Yu Li immediately stood in front of Aotian, her demonic aura boiling. "God's messenger, if you dare to touch him, I will die with you." Xianli frowned slightly, and said coldly, "A demon girl, dare to stop me." Aotian raised his bloody hand and said coldly, "Xianli, if I go to the divine realm, I will never be a prisoner, but an enemy." Chapter 18. Civil strife in the imperial dynasty broke out again. Because Aotian was implicated in both the divine and demonic realms, many court officials attacked him, believing him to be a threat. Li Xuan's even wrote a letter to the emperor, bluntly stating, "If Aotian is not executed, the world will be in turmoil." But the people shouted on the streets, "Aotian is our hero." The situation reached a stalemate for a while, and Emperor Mo Yao's heart was shaken. Although he respects Aotian, he also has to take into account the overall situation. Aotian knew the controversy in the court, but he was unshakable. He sat quietly outside the city and continued to understand the power of the divine secret in the heavenly book. Suddenly, a strange woman appeared, dressed in purple, with mysterious eyes. She said softly, "Do you know that the book of heaven is not complete? The true source is hidden in the depths of the divine realm." Aotian suddenly opened his eyes, his expression was shocked. "Who are you?" The woman smiled, turned, and disappeared, leaving behind only a single word that echoed in the wind, "If you wish to conquer the world, you must first conquer the divine realm." Chapter 19. The news spread all over the world. The divine realm will send the judgment army to descend in 10 days, with only one purpose, to completely wipe out Aotian. The entire imperial dynasty shook. The people were worried, the ministers were shaken, and some even advocated directly handing over Aotian to protect the imperial dynasty. However, countless young warriors and civilians spontaneously gathered outside the imperial city, shouting, "Aotian! We are willing to fight with you." Aotian climbed the city tower and looked at the thousands of people, his eyes burning. His voice was like thunder, spreading all over the earth. "If the divine realm wants to use order as a shackle, then we will smash all this with our blood and soul." The people were boiling in fighting spirit. Yue stood beside him and laughed softly, "You finally. No more alone." Chapter 20. 10 days later, the sky cracked, and the army of judgment descended. Tens of thousands of divine soldiers, clad in silver armor and wielding spears of holy light, descended upon the imperial city in a crushing force. Leading them was the divine warrior Fenshen, whose aura was like the scorching sun, illuminating the vast expanse. Fenshen's voice thundered, "Mortal Aotian, today your soul will be shattered." Inside and outside the imperial city, civilians and warriors alike shouted in unison, drawing swords and spears to confront the divine soldiers head-on. A shimmer of blood and holy light intertwined, creating a scene reminiscent of the apocalypse. Aotian stood at the front, the power of the divine spell and the heavenly book surrounded his body, his eyes were like knives, and his voice spread throughout the sky, "Burning heaven, if you want to kill me, you must first step on the bones of the common people in the world." He swung his divine technique, the golden light soared into the sky, and he collided fiercely with countless divine soldiers, and the battlefield instantly turned into a sea of destruction. The sky trembled, and the three realms were shocked. Chapter 21. Over the imperial city, the war was raging. The silver spear of the Inquisition army pierced the sky, and when it fell, it was like a rain of meteorites, and the entire earth trembled. Although the people were just mortals, they still had red eyes, holding the most rudimentary knives, axes, and agricultural tools, and rushed into the enemy camp. Their flesh and blood bodies looked small under the divine light, but they burned the most fierce flames. Aotian wielded his divine art, and divine light pierced through the heavens and earth like a golden river, tearing apart one divine weapon after another. Fenshen sneered, raised his scorching sun spear, and collided head-on with Aotian. Boom! Heaven and earth are shattered, and the city walls are falling. Emperor Mo Yao personally put on armor and led the forbidden army to kill. Li Xuan stood at the head of the city, his face gloomy, and his eyes flashed with an unknown light. He secretly said in his heart, "If Aotian dies in battle, no one in the world will be able to compete with him for power." But when the burning heaven war spear and divine technique bombarded again, the entire imperial city fell to the brink of collapse. At this moment, the fragments of the heavenly book suddenly turned over on their own, countless golden talisman cultures formed a huge formation, enveloping the entire city, forcibly resisting the might of the divine army. Aotian roared, "Everyone, follow me and kill." The sound of the battle shook the sky, and the heavens and the earth changed. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 22. After 3 days and 3 nights of bloody fighting, the imperial city remained standing. However, the price is deplorable. Countless people, warriors, and forbidden troops fell in a pool of blood, and mountains of corpses and seas of blood piled up like city walls. Prince Mo Yao was also severely injured and almost died. Although Aotian fought hard to burn the sky, he gradually ran out of strength. Just when burning heaven was about to pierce him with the final blow, Yueli suddenly stood in front of him. Her body was pierced by the scorching sun war gun, and blood flowed profusely, but she still looked at the burning sky coldly, and the demonic aura surged, forcing him to retreat a few steps. "You." Aotian trembled, his eyes red. Yueli smiled and said softly, "Don't cry, Aotian. You are the hope of the world." She suddenly burst out with the demonic power in her body, dying with the scorching sun war gun, instantly turning into silver light in the sky and scattering on the battlefield. Aotian roared, the power of the divine formula completely out of control, like a world-destroying frenzy that severely damaged Fenshen. Seeing the general fall, the judgment army finally retreated. After the war, the imperial city was dead and silent. Aotian hugged Yueli's dissipated afterimage and burst into tears. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 23. Yueli's sacrifice shook the world. The people regarded her as the silver fox saint and built a temple to worship her. Aotian fell into endless pain. He understood that this battle was just the beginning. At night, the fragments of the Book of Heaven turned over again, and a line of ancient characters appeared, "Seek the truth, ascend to the heavens." Aotian understood that only by going to the divine realm could he completely break this endless fate. Emperor Mo Yao summoned Aotian, his expression haggard but resolute, "I will give up the throne and hand over the empire to you. I hope you can lead the human race and survive." Aotian shook his head and said in a firm tone, "The throne is not my way. What I want is to make the world no longer distinguish between kings and ants." Mo Yao was stunned, his heart was mixed. Li Xuan sneered, "What a big tone, do you really think you are a god?" Aotian looked back indifferently, "If God is unkind, then I will become a god." Underscore 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 un. Chapter 24. The divine realm is in turmoil. The news of the defeat of the burning heaven came back, and the entire Protoss was furious. The God King Hokan ordered to open the heavenly punishment platform, preparing to completely introduce Aotian and then wipe it out. And at the border of the divine realm, a woman in purple stood quietly in the clouds, her eyes calm. It was the mysterious man who had pointed out Aotian before. Her name is Su Yao, a heretic of the divine realm who was banished for opposing the order. Su Yao looked toward the human world and whispered, Aotian, if you truly have the courage, then come to the divine realm. If not, then let heaven and earth sink. She turned around and disappeared, leaving behind a purple light. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 25. Aotian decided to set off. He and a few followers embarked on the ancient road to heaven, which is said to have existed since the flood era, connecting the human world and the divine world, and is extremely dangerous. On the way, there were landslides, tsunamis, cracks in the void, and countless remains of demons turned into corpses to block the way. Li Suans also quietly followed, secretly plotting in his heart, if Aotian fell on the ancient road, he would be able to replace him. As they walked deeper into the ancient road, they suddenly saw a river of blood thousands of feet deep, the water churning with countless vengeful spirits. Everyone was terrified, but then they saw Aotian raise his divine spell and resolutely step into the blood river. The blood river wraith spirit bit frantically, but the divine technique was as brilliant as the scorching sun, suppressing them one by one. Aotian walked through the river of blood step by step, his back was extremely resolute, which made the eyes of all his followers hot. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 26. Finally, Aotian stepped into the border of the divine realm. This is an incomparably magnificent world, with 9 days hanging in the sun and thousands of miles of holy light. Countless temples floated in the clouds, like a fairyland. However, he was greeted not by the beautiful scenery, but by the teams of divine soldiers. The leader was Xian Li. Suan Li looked at Aotian coldly, with some complexity in his eyes. Aotian, you know that this trip will surely die, why are you obsessed? Aotian said in a steady voice, if it's for the people, even if I die, I have no regrets. Xian Li was slightly shocked, a trace of struggle flashed in his eyes, but he finally raised his spear, then fight. The two of them killed to the clouds, and the divine light and golden on intertwined, dyeing the entire heavenly border into a battlefield of blood and fire. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 27. After 3 days of fierce fighting, Aotian and Suan Li were both injured. Just when Xian Li was about to end the battle with the final blow, a purple light suddenly flashed, and Su Yao appeared and blocked the blow. Xian Li's eyes were cold. Rebel god. How dare you interfere? Su Yao sneered, you call yourself gods, but you are just tyrants cloaked in holy light. Aotian, follow me. She rushed into the depths of the divine realm with Aotian and disappeared in front of Xian Li's eyes. Xian Li roared angrily, but couldn't catch up. Aotian was seriously injured and unconscious, and when he woke up, he was already in a palace surrounded by purple light. Su Yao looked at him quietly, her voice low, if you want to truly win the championship, you must get the complete heavenly book. And it. Hidden in the heavenly punishment platform. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 28. The heavenly punishment platform is the highest execution ground in the divine realm, specializing in suppressing the oldest forbidden things. Su Yao told Aotian that the origin of the Book of Heaven was locked in the heavenly punishment platform by the god King Hokan, and anyone who stepped into it would die without life. Aotian just smiled indifferently, if the common people in the world want to live, I must take it. Su Yao stared at him with complicated eyes, how similar are you to a person from 1,000 years ago? She finally sighed, okay, I'll help you on the way. But if you fail, I will personally cut you off, so that the world will not fall into chaos again. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 29. Outside the heavenly punishment platform, guarded by countless gods and encircled by numerous barriers, Aotian and Su Yao infiltrated, but were still discovered. Countless divine soldiers swarmed in, their cries of slaughter resonating through the heavens. Aotian wielded his divine spells, while Su Yao activated the purple flame divine art. The two fought side by side, fighting for 7 days and 7 nights, finally breaking into the heavenly punishment platform. Inside the heavenly punishment platform, there was endless darkness, and in the center was a huge golden heavenly book, its brilliance shining on all worlds. However, a massive, armored figure stood guard before the heavenly book. Its eyes were hollow, and its voice was cold and indifferent. "Mortals, no approach." Aotian clenched the divine formula and roared, "Then I will fight for it with my life." Underscore 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 un. Chapter 30. War. The giant shadow swung out the Zhentian giant axe, and every blow could shatter the void. Aotian had broken bones all over his body, and blood surged wildly, but he still blocked it. Su Yao also activated her divine power and bombarded the giant shadow, and the two were almost crushed into powder. Just when he was in a desperate situation, the Book of Heaven suddenly flashed, and countless runes flew out and merged into Aotian body. Rumble. Aotian's whole body surged with golden light, the divine technique and the heavenly book were completely integrated, and his aura instantly surpassed the mortal gods, like a newborn heavenly way. The giant shadow roared and was finally completely shattered. Aotian slowly stretched out his hand and held the origin of the Book of Heaven. Between heaven and earth, there was an unprecedented roar. All three worlds are shaken. Chapter 31. The roar of the heavenly punishment platform had not yet dissipated, and the entire divine realm fell into fear. Countless temples trembled, the holy light was distorted, and the sky was torn apart by an unprecedented force. The gods looked into the depths of the crack and saw a golden figure slowly walking out. Aotian. He was no longer immortal, surrounded by endless runes, and the origin of the Book of Heaven and the divine formula became one. The breath was as vast as the sea, and even the divine soldiers looked at it from a distance, and they couldn't help but kneel on the ground. Su Yao slowly stepped forward, her expression solemn. "You are no longer ordinary, but you are not a pure god either. You have embarked on a path that no one has ever traveled." Aotian just looked up at the sky, his voice low but determined, "If this road can set all souls free, I will go to the end." And in the distance, God King Hokan's eyes finally became cold. The heavenly book has been stolen. This battle must be fought with the blood of all realms. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 32. The divine realm shook, and Hokan ordered the divine realm blockade to be activated, blocking the entire realm, and no existence was allowed to enter or exit. When Xian Li heard about this order, his heart was shaken. He recalled the battle with Aotian, and the indomitable heart deeply shocked him. What if he is a tyrant? What is the difference between us and ants? He muttered to himself. However, as the most loyal general of the divine realm, he still had to lead the heavenly army to guard the 9 heavenly gates. Aotian entered an ancient ruin under the guidance of Su Yao. This place is called Mixed Abyss and is said to be a forbidden place left by the original battle between gods and demons. In the depths of the chaotic abyss, Aotian saw countless ancient beings imprisoned in chains, their eyes burning with anger and sorrow. An old voice sounded, "Young man, you hold the Book of Heaven. Are you the new generation of judges?" Aotian was shocked and realized that the secret behind the Book of Heaven was far larger than he had imagined. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 33. The Lord of the Abyss appeared. It was an ancient giant god with burning black flames with double eyes, calling himself Ruin Ming. Su Ming told Aotian that the Protoss was not the true successor of the heavenly Dao, but seized the original will and usurped the throne. The Book of Heaven is the source of the symbiosis between heaven and earth and all spirits. The Protoss took away the origin, established a false order, and turned all worlds into cages. After hearing this, Aotian suddenly shook in his heart. If this is true, the holy light and order of the Protoss are actually based on deception and suppression. Su Yao was silent for a long time before saying coldly, "I rebelled back then because I saw all this." Aotian looked at the heavenly book in his hand, his eyes gradually becoming resolute. "In that case, I will tear apart this false divine throne." Su Ming laughed and gave a ray of his remaining ruin flame to Aotian. "Young man, I hope you can go to the end." Underscore 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 un. Chapter 34. In the council hall of the gods, Hokan summoned all the gods. The elders of the Protoss were in an uproar. Some advocated sending all their troops to suppress Aotian with all their might, while others were worried, if he is really a person recognized by the Book of Heaven, confronting him may cause greater turmoil. Hokan's expression was cold, and he only spat out one sentence: "Those who resist, kill." Xian Li lowered his head and said nothing, setting off a storm in his heart. At the same time, Aotian led Su Yao and a few followers to sneak to the core of the divine realm, the Holy Universe heavenly domain. It enshrines the true foundation of the Protoss, the seat of heavenly power. However, as soon as they stepped into the Holy Universe, they were surrounded by the divine army. A cold snort sounded. Aotian, this is not the place you should come. What appeared was his former comrade in arms, Li Suans. Chapter 35. Li Suan's figure was wearing the armor of a divine general, with thousands of divine armies behind him. Aotian's eyes were cold. I see. You have long since defected to the Protoss. Li Suans laughed loudly, his eyes crazy. Take refuge? No. This is the real road to heaven. Instead of being led by you, a fool, it is better for me to control all worlds with my own hands. He suddenly shot, his sword light was like thunder, and he slashed directly at Aotian. The friendship between the two in the past instantly turned into a flame of hatred. Aotian waved his divine technique to meet the attack, and the heavenly book runes surged and collided fiercely with Li Suan's reverse divine sword. The battle reached mid-air, the void shattered, and the army roared. Su Yao faced off against the divine generals, her eyes were cold, and the purple flames danced wildly, like Ashura. This battle is not only a contest of strength, but also a tier of faith. Chapter 36. The battle between Aotian and Li Suans alarmed the entire divine realm. Both of them were from the human race, but they embarked on completely different paths. One fights for the common people, and the other is crazy for power and ambition. Li Suan's swordsmanship was extremely treacherous, and every sword contained the power to destroy the sky. He sneered, Aotian, you think you are the savior, but you are just another tyrant. Only strength is the only truth. Aotian roared, if power is not benevolent, it is just a shackle. As the two clashed, the celestial temples shattered one after another. The divine army was horrified, and no one dared approach. Finally, Aotian ignited the ruin flame and the essence of the heavenly book, forcibly suppressing Li Suans and blasting him into the abyss with a single palm strike. Li Suans spat blood from his mouth, and before he died, he still laughed arrogantly, Aotian. Even if you defeat me, you can't change your fate. Aotian felt heavy in his heart, knowing that the real enemy was still higher. Chapter 37. Li Suans fell, and the divine realm was shaken. Hokan was not angry, but smiled coldly, interesting. It is really worth killing with your own hands. He finally came to the battlefield in person. Hokan was wearing a platinum divine robe, and the divine wheel behind him was so powerful that the heavens and the earth trembled. Aotian faced the God King for the first time, and he felt the oppression of death in his heart. Su Yao's eyes were cold, and he said in a low voice, be careful, his power is not simple divine power, but steals the traces of heaven. Hao Chen raised his hand, and the holy light turned into chains, instantly suppressing Aotian and Su Yao. The body of a mortal, trying to win the championship? Ants should crawl forever. Aotian burst his bones all over his body, but he still roared, if God is a tyrant, then I am a rebellious God. Chapter 38. Aotian burned out the flames and forcibly broke free from the chains. The heavenly book runes surged wildly, and he and Hokan faced each other. This battle transcended the battle between gods and demons, like the collision of the origin of heaven and earth. The phantom of the seat of heavenly power appeared in Hokan's palm, which was the foundation of the entire Protoss. He laughed wildly, even if you win the heavenly book, you can't change it. This heaven and earth belong to the strong. Aotian gritted his teeth, his eyes bloodshot. No. Heaven and earth belong to all spirits, not to any one clan. The two fought their way beyond the ninth heaven, shattering even the stars. However, Hokan's power was too terrifying, Aotian was gradually suppressed, blood spat out, and his body was shaking. Upon seeing this, Su Yao burned her own divine nature without hesitation, transforming into a pillar of purple flame and forcibly repelling Hao Chen. Aotian. To the end. She smiled and then dissipated into heaven and earth. underscore 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 un. Chapter 39. Aotian was shocked, and tears flowed down with blood. Yue, Suyeo, all those who had been with him along the way, had sacrificed for him. I can't retreat. I can't let them down. He roared suddenly, and the heavenly book rune was fully awakened. The whole person is transformed into a golden flame god, stepping on heaven and earth, and bearing the wish of all spirits. Hokan's eyes changed, and he finally moved his true character and sacrificed the seat of heavenly power. The throne of heavenly power is suspended in the sky, shining like the sun, pressing all the worlds to bow down. Aotian strode forward, his voice shaking the sky. Hokan, today I want to completely smash this false divine throne. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 40. The final battle breaks out. Hokan controls the seat of heavenly power. The holy light is like a torrent of destruction. Aotian urges the origin of the heavenly book, and the golden talisman is like an infinite river. The two battled in the ninth heaven, each collision shattering the heavens and earth. Stars extinguished, and the universe trembled. Hokan laughed wildly. You are still immortal after all. Why fight with me? Aotian roared like thunder, by the wishes of the people, by the hearts of all spirits. He turned all his beliefs, all sacrifices, all his blood and tears into power, and finally smashed the seat of heavenly power with one palm. Rumble. The holy light collapsed, and Hokan vomited blood and retreated, his face full of disbelief. No. This is impossible. Aotian stood in the 9 clouds, surrounded by the power of all spirits, and his voice shook the entire divine realm. From this day forward, the throne of God will crumble, and the world will return to its former glory. Chapter 41. The moment the seat of heavenly power shattered, the entire divine realm trembled violently. The temple collapsed, and countless Protoss lost their support and scattered in fear. Their power was rapidly draining, as if they had been drawn from their foundation. No. This is impossible. Without heavenly power, we would cease to exist. The Protoss elders screamed. In the lower realm, all races felt the loosening of the shackles at the same time. The divine seal that had been pressing on their souls for many years melted like ice and snow at this moment. They looked up to the sky and roared, their voices echoing between heaven and earth. Aotian looked at the sky, not relaxed, because he knew that the Protoss would collapse, and the order of heaven and earth would fall into complete chaos. If no one reforges the heavenly way, all worlds will usher in a storm of destruction. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 42. The defeated Hokan did not die, and after his body was shattered, it turned into a strange black light and shadow. Ha ha ha. Aotian, do you think defeating me will be the end? The light and shadow were frantically distorted, and countless phantom hands were stretched out from it, as if they were coming from the endless abyss. Su Ming's voice sounded from afar, low and frightened. Not good. It was the primordial remnant. The dark wool left over from the Protoss stealing the way of heaven. Hokan laughed. I am one with the remnants, and from now on, I will be the only one in the world. Darkness engulfed the 9 heavens, and all worlds fell into eternal night. Aotian flashed with golden light all over his body, and he stared at Hokan. Then, I will use the book of heaven as a sword to cut down this false god. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 43. Hokan was no longer a simple god king, but a nightmare god, and his aura was even more terrifying than before. With a wave of his hand, the dark tide swept across the galaxy, and even the light was torn apart. Aotian did not retreat but advanced, stepping on the void, and the runes of the Book of Heaven bloomed like countless scorching suns. He shattered the darkness with every step and rushed towards the nightmare. The two fought and the sky trembled. Darkness and light collided in the universe, forming a huge vortex, and the creatures of all worlds looked up and held their breath. At this moment, Aotian felt the call of countless common people, and their beliefs turned into points of light and melted into his body. I am no longer alone, but the power of all spirits. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 44. The battle lasted for 9 days and nights. The stars fell and the void broke. The voice of the nightmare god was crazy. Aotian, you are just an ant. Why do you compete with me for eternity? Aotian was covered in blood, but his eyes were determined. I may be an ant, but all spirits are like me. You are not trampling on me alone, but on countless lives. He raised the heavenly book high, and the talismans transformed into a trillion divine swords, slashing down in unison. Rumble. The dark body of the nightmare god was split, and it let out a piercing roar. However, what followed was a larger black mist, as if the origin of heaven and earth had been corroded. Su Ming anxiously transmitted, Aotian. If you don't use yourself as a guide, you won't be able to completely suppress the remnant nightmare. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 45. Aotian was shaken. Take yourself as a guide. That means that he will die with the remnants. The figures of Su Yao, Yueli, and all the followers flashed in his mind. His fingers trembled slightly, but his eyes became more and more resolute. If I can exchange this for the freedom of all worlds, why should I fear death? He pressed the heavenly book to his heart and burned his life and soul. Endless golden light burst out from his body, and his voice shook all worlds. With my body, I will establish a new heaven for all souls. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 46. Light and darkness collide for the last time. Aotian turned into a giant shadow of golden flames, tightly entangled with the nightmare god. His flesh and soul continued to disintegrate, but he still suppressed each other. The nightmare god roared, Ants! How dare you? Aotian yelled, Because It's a person. Rumble. The entire divine realm exploded, and countless temples turned to ashes. The black mist was torn apart by the light, and the remnants let out their final howls, completely collapsing. And Aotian's figure also dissipated without a trace with the light. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 47. Heaven and earth fell into dead silence. All worlds looked up at the sky, and the original divine realm had turned into ruins. There is no seat of heavenly power, and there is no arrogance. Countless living beings cried and paid tribute to the man who exchanged his life for freedom. At this moment, a gentle light rose from the ruins and sprinkled on all the worlds of Kyushu. The light was not oppressive, but it made people feel peaceful, as if heaven and earth had truly regained their balance. People were shocked to realize that there were no more forced shackles of the gods between heaven and earth, practitioners could break through freely, and all spirits could practice as they pleased. Although Aotian disappeared, the will he left behind had been integrated into the origin of heaven and earth. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 48. Years later, a new order gradually took shape. The councils of each tribe established a CO Lord Hall on the ruins, and different races deliberated on an equal footing to elect guardians, and there were no more gods in high positions. After the war, Xian Li retired from the army. He often sat alone among the ruins, gazing at the sky. Someone asked him if he had any regrets. He just said lightly, if it weren't for Aotian, we would always live in lies. Tsukiri's descendants have established a new clan to carry on her beliefs. The name of Su Yao was revered as the purple flame goddess by later generations. And about Aotian, there is an ancient poem in all worlds. Man is not God, but he is better than God, blood and fire are exchanged for the lives of the people. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 49. However, outside the endless starry sky, a blurred figure slowly woke up. That's Aotian. He did not really fall, but was guided by the origin of heaven and earth, guarding the eternal tribulation realm, a space older than the divine realm. There is an unknown power sealed here, far more terrifying than the remnants. Aotian stared at the endless darkness, but there was no fear in his heart. If this is my destination, then I will guard here until all worlds are truly worry-free. His figure gradually disappeared into darkness, becoming a silent but eternal watchman. Underscore 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 un. Chapter 50, Finale. Thousands of years after the Wanja calendar, people are still praising the name of Aotian. He is not God, but he is greater than God. He is not an emperor, but he is more selfless than an emperor. In the new generation, children look up at the starry sky and point to the brightest star and ask, what is that? The elder smiled and replied, "That's Aotian. When all spirits need him, he will return again." In the depths of the eternal tribulation realm, a pair of eyes opened slightly, with endless perseverance and softness. Aotian murmured softly, "If the world ever becomes chaotic again, I will return." Light and darkness flowed around him, and his figure was like an eternal lighthouse, watching over the world.